merger context. And then the issue of remedies. I won't talk much about remedies, but this is something that you need to think about early on in the process. The hypothesis we're dealing with is there's going to be a problem. You know there are difficult issues with this merger, so don't wait to the last minute. You don't go in blind to the agency without having thought through what your remedies or the range of remedies that your client is prepared to contemplate, because there's going to be a break point. There will be a point where a client says this deal is not worth it if I have to divest these assets or if I have to enter into this supply agreement with my competitors, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to know all the parameters of what remedies may be applicable or required by the agencies and what your client is prepared to accept. That'll go to pricing. It'll go to a whole host of deal issues. So those things, you need to be thinking about these things not just after you've signed the deal and everybody's issued their press releases, it's a public matter, and now we start thinking about remedies? No. You need to think about this early as when you're planning the deal, perhaps even before the parties enter into discussions. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go into the agency right at the get-go with a packaged remedy. You might find yourself negotiating against yourself. Those are tactical issues. Some mergers will be so problematic that to go in without a remedy on the table would be ludicrous. You'll just be laughed at by the agencies. So sometimes that's what you want to do. Other times, you hold back. You acknowledge the issues, but you play a little bit of a diplomatic stance. It's a negotiation. Let's not forget, these things, by and large, are negotiations. Your purpose in this exercise is to close the transaction with a consensual arrangement with the agency. It's not litigation. If we want to talk litigation, it'll be a different panel, and we've all had that experience, and we can elaborate on that. So that's that. And then finally, the point of negotiation. In many jurisdictions, I believe it's common in the EU and certainly in Canada, we tend to go in on a notification with a competition analysis, a written brief, white paper, I think you call it in the EU. It's less common in the United States from what I can tell, but I suspect it happens from time to time. But for our jurisdictions, and perhaps this is particularly important for young antitrust jurisdictions, your task as counsel, as much as anything, is to educate the agencies. Bill's presentation talked about co-producers. I don't think there was anything that mentioned law firms. I saw trade or professional associations in there. But law firms are co-producers, and counsel are co-producers. It's in your framing of the transactions and your submissions to the agency that you will set the course on a day-to-day practical level of the kinds of issues the agency is going to pay attention to. They'll have other issues, and there are other co-producers, but you're the critical ones. You, as the advocates, in-house counsel or private counsel, are the parties who take the first step in setting the analytical exercise of assessing and evaluating a merger. You're the first one to do it, and you're the first one to present it to the agency. So you are very much a co-producer, and what you do in the younger agencies, in dealing with younger agencies in Croatia and Serbia and Macedonia, and throughout some parts of Eastern Europe, Latin America, Africa, is critical. The coordinated approach covers a range of issues, which I've just summarized here and I've talked about during the course of the presentation. I'd like to finish with an important, I think probably a fundamental point in a multi-jurisdictional context. Competition authorities talk to each other, sometimes regularly on a daily basis. Sometimes, so for example, the Canadian Competition Bureau and the US DOJ and FTC are in regular contact on virtually every cross-border deal. I expect it's the same thing between the Commission, DG Competition, and the two agencies in the US. It may vary from officer to officer or branch to branch or case by case. In some cases, there are strategic issues that an agency wants to. It's not uncommon to have the EU or the US agency say, we're going to move along first and get to a certain point for whatever reasons, bureaucratic, strategic, who knows, before we start talking with you in a detailed way. These things happen, but they do talk. As we said, it's common practice to require waivers, certainly to request them, and so then they can talk not just in macro terms, but in very detailed terms. And equally important for jurisdictions like Croatia or other jurisdictions where the competition agencies are young, that communication between agencies can be to your advantage. It's not uncommon for a young agency or inexperienced officers, case review officers, to get hung up on issues that are intuitively interesting and perhaps important, but fundamentally, when you do the antitrust analysis, irrelevant. So, for example, competitor concerns. There are very few mergers where there are issues, significant competition issues, where competitors aren't there whining and complaining to the agency. Are their concerns important? Not very. So that's something that people will start taking into account. And so having a more mature agency help you frame the case and help you move the agency you're dealing with away from a misguided theory or a misguided concern can be very important. It happens all the time. So as I say, agencies talk to each other. That can work against you, but can also work for you. And I think from a process standpoint, I've probably used close to my 10 minutes. So I'll stop here and we'll move on.
Okay. Thank you. And Paula, will you provide the perspective from the economic world?
Thank you.